Hello everyone, my name is Blaine and my channel is Tiratus. It's been 2 months since my last video, so what have I been doing in that time? Well, I quit my last project around Christmas, and after sleeping on it for a while I came to realize what I really want to do next at the beginning of January. I gained a lot of art and skills through my last project to use in the future, so it wasn't a total loss. But this new project was something new and ambitious that I've never attempted before, and I wasn't sure if I could even do anything with a concept like this or if it was even technically feasible. It's called Project Under. It's a first-person immersive experience set in a futuristic procedurally generated city in an underground tunnel on a low-gravity world. Also, there are flying cars and aliens. Nothing too ambitious for a solo developer. So I came up with a plan to make a 1-week prototype of the general concept. I typed up the plan for the following week, consisting of well-thought-out and very specific goals for each day that, if followed, the prototype would be complete, and I would hopefully have my answer as to whether this project was achievable. After typing up the plan, I used ChatGPT to help format the plan and create a tidy checklist for each day that I could print out and have waiting on my desk the next afternoon to begin my challenge. And to be clear, I thought up and typed these daily goals myself and only fed that document to ChatGPT to format that information and make it look more professional because it saved time. The plan was my own. The goal of day 1 was to make all of the essential art that I would need for the demo. 4 flying cars, human characters with different hairstyles for variety, procedural building parts, and glowing signs that would be scattered everywhere for lighting. For the characters, I just modified the ones from my last project that were already rigged and animated. Next were the most important assets, the flying cars. To get started, I copied a low-poly flying car I made in an old project from when my skills were significantly inferior to what they are now. Then I added some detail and modeled 3 more with a similar style. Finally, I chose one of them, the simplest, to give an interior and simple landing gear. This would be the player aircraft. Lastly, it was time to make the building pieces, and unexpectedly this is where I was stumped. I had a vague idea but not a clear picture on how the buildings and underground tunnels would be generated or what they would look like. So I paused my 1-week challenge to spend a few days building a 3D illustration in Blender for how it could work and to see if I could make something interesting. There were multiple failures before I got to something I liked. Then, without any more distractions and my confidence restored, I modeled all of the tunnel, building, and sign pieces on the following day. The next task list, which I can no longer call the Day 2 task list, was all about importing and setting up everything in Godot. Importing and setting up that many models at once took longer than expected, but when I was done I discovered something surprising that felt almost too good to be true. When playing with lighting in this little scene, I happened to enable global illumination. Until now I thought I was going to have to light the underground city with hundreds of point lights and optimize and fake it wherever I could. So when seeing global illumination at work, the potential for it got me really excited. But I was still skeptical and would have to test it in a larger scene first. I was able to copy my pause menu and character controller over from my last project too. Alright, with most of the modeling and importing out of the way, task list 3 was all about writing code. Specifically, the flying car and building generation scripts. I started with the building generation. I have 3 street-level building parts and 5 upper-level parts that get chosen at random, and then roof parts are added to the top. Right now it looks very ominous. So I added glowing signs with random colors and relied on global illumination to light this scene. Each building part has spawn points for signs that get chosen at random. And this lights the scene fairly well. Finally, I added bridges. But I ran out of time without even getting started on the car. So I started coding the car the next day and was able to make use of some interaction code from my previous project to get started. I can open doors, sit down, and press buttons on this panel, which I quickly modeled in Blender. The launch and land button work, but since I don't have any city generation code yet, I also don't have a path for the aircraft to fly on. So it just floats off when leaving the landing pad. So I moved on to the fourth list the next day, which is all about procedurally generating the city. However, to simplify the demo, I decided to only use straight tunnel pieces and corners. So no T-sections or cross-sections. This doesn't leave much to do with procedural generation, so I took a different approach. I created these tiles to represent tunnel pieces in Blender. Then I imported the two I needed into Godot and created a new scene, added a simple little script to the tiles to tell my generator what type of tile they are, and I could quickly build a map. I made several of them that are all circuits with no dead ends. Then when I start the game, a random map gets chosen from a list, and I get the position, rotation, and type of each tile from the list to build the city. Next, for the aircraft paths, I just place nodes where I want the aircraft to fly and give them a simple script that links them together. Each block has a start node for one path and an end node for the other direction on each end of the block. All I have to do is connect the end node to the adjacent block's start node and the path through the city is complete. Then once the city is complete, the player and their aircraft is placed on a random landing pad. Finally, to complete the aircraft script, when entering the sky it first flies to the nearest path node or its parallel neighbor. When it gets close, it changes its target to the next node linked to that one. Every node also links to the node across in the other lane. So to make a U-turn, I just set the target to that node. Since the player car and the NPC cars all run on the same aircraft script, I went ahead and added a simple NPC aircraft spawner script that places a given number of them across the city with random vehicle types and materials. And because they kept flying through each other and the player too often, I coded the aircraft script to fire a ray forward and slow the vehicle down if it detects another too close in front of it. Although it needs work, that was enough to almost completely prevent the issue. So in one day I cleared the day 3, day 4, and half of the day 5 checklist. I'm catching back up. The next day's task list was focused entirely on generating pedestrians on the streets, since the NPC aircrafts were already done. First, I wrote code to simply spawn the character models in their idle pose with no scripts attached to them. Only 20 per block and about 500 in total, and I was shocked to find that it tanked my frame rate for some reason. Coincidentally, I came across someone on the internet recently who was ranting about how slow animation trees were. So before anything else, I tried disabling the animation trees on the characters even though they weren't currently playing any animations. And that was exactly the issue. Here I removed the animation trees entirely and have scripts on every NPC that play what's supposed to be a talking animation on NPCs directly from the animation player. And I disable the animation player when they are far away. There are almost 3,000 of them, and it still performs very well. So that person I luckily came across was right. In the future I will have time to optimize this a lot more. For example, there are currently almost 20 bones in each hand in each character across the city. But you can't see hand animations from even 30 meters away, so at that distance I could have a separate rig that has no hand bones and only 10 bones in total. But I don't have time for that now. So with the animations performance issues sorted, I finished writing the generation and behavior code for them. They now have random skin, hair, apparel, and LED colors. They will randomly walk around the block they spawn on, occasionally walking in buildings but doors don't open yet. And I can interact with them and they will temporarily stop what they are doing and play the talk animation. They don't spawn on upper levels yet because I just didn't have time. Task List 6 was mostly another day spent in Blender. I made actual models for the landing pads, and took it a step further than I had to make a second larger pad. Up until now there has only been one landing pad at the center of every block in the form of a flattened cube, and only the player could land. The NPCs could land, they were running on the same script, but the little AI script attached to them could only give them commands to make U-turns. So now I placed more pads on the blocks and wrote a bit more code to only allow the bigger two aircrafts to land on the bigger pads and the smaller two on the smaller pads. I also added some code to the building generator to have a chance to spawn pads on the roofs. Then I added a few lines of code to allow the AI scripts to sometimes give their vehicles the landing command. I didn't have much time left in the day, so I made these 5 props as quickly as I could to finish the daily list. I'm convinced now that anything looks good in a dark scene with a glowing material on it. The only one I spent time on was the bench with the light above it. I made a Tron-like trash can, the simplest soda machine model you will ever see. Grabbed a street lamp that I already had. And lastly, I made a glowing plant box and placed this tree inside that some of you may recognize from an older video. I didn't have time to write the procedural placement code for them that day. Instead, I just attached them to the landing pad and street prefabs first thing the next day. They still can't be interacted with for now. The final day was all about adding sound to the game. Some of the previous tasks wanted me to try adding a few sounds, but I kept putting it off. There is one area of game development that I am lacking in more than any other, and it is sound design. In fact, this will be the first time that I have added an audio file to a project in Godot, Unity, or any other as far as I can recall. I'm sure I followed a tutorial at some point that included sound, but I haven't ever made or added sound to a personal project until now. So with that being said, I spent the day going around my house recording various sounds on my phone. And even though it was raining nonstop and people were talking too much, I managed to get all of the sounds I needed and edit them in Audacity. There are 13 in total. I only used one sound that I didn't make. It's the street-level ambient city background sound. But even it was heavily edited to remove sirens, car horns, and people talking too clearly. Once I had all of my sounds, I spent the rest of the day coding them into the game to include features like outside sounds being lower when the player is inside the car with the doors shut and the street-level sound fading with height. So here is the final result of my 1-week demo that turned into almost 2.
Greetings.
Hello?
Greetings.